What up? What up? I thought we started like this. I thought we started like this. Real talk, real people.
It's your boy Yo Gotti. Yeah. Gucci Mane the Flair. My nigga Ralph in here. Say Tobin on the beat, nigga. And it's a street nigga holiday. My nigga DJ Holiday. Yeah.
Brics, all white bricks, all white bricks, white 10 bricks. Just hit a lick for 50 more bricks. Ballin' like a bitch with all these bricks. 36 zips, that's a whole chick. Want a bad bitch, gotta have bricks. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I make hits, but I still take so I can see, yo, I'm a fool with the snow. They think I'm putting VVS jewels in the coke. My watch a cool 100, paint job a cold 20. And after this flip, I'm quitting the trap cold turkey. Psych, the pack in and I'm working. Drought season in, charge your ass the whole 30. But right now, you can get it for a low number. This bitch scale white, same color my armor. Zone 6, polar bears never see summer. It's winter all year cause the birds fly younger. 95 Air Max cause I'm a dope runner. I'm ballin' like an athlete but got no jumper. It's Brics. All white bricks, all white bricks, white 10 bricks. Just hit a lick for 50 more bricks. Ballin' like a bitch with all these bricks. 36 zips, that's a whole chick. Want a bad bitch, gotta have bricks. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I make hits, but I still take bricks.
I'm like a waitress in the trap, I got something to serve. And 16 bars, same price for a bird. What you need, a bird? Or a couple pounds? I'm on TV now, you know my side of town. So many bricks, I can build my own apartment. You better have a check when you come in my department. Yes, I break them down, and I sell them whole. Try me, watch a whole crew fall like some dominoes. I got a trap house and a trap car. 100,000 off a cap, that's a trap star. All this smoke got me feeling real nauseous. Riding with them bricks got me feeling real cautious.
Brics, all white bricks, all white bricks, white 10 bricks. Just hit a lick for 50 more bricks. Ballin' like a bitch with all these bricks. 36 zips, that's a whole chick. Want a bad bitch, gotta have bricks. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I make hits, but I still take bricks.
Tony Montana, all I have in this world is my 100-round chopper and my white girl. Oil-based bricks, shit hard to cook. Call the plug back, tell me got to. Know what that mean? This shit free. That mean none for him and more for me. I took some, I'm gutter, bitch. Don't trust me, dog. This that no Memphis shit. Old school, new Porsche, couple choppers just in case they wanna go to war. Brics, aka my best friend. 28-inch rims, call them grown me. Dope step dome, call it stepchild. I got that Slim Shady, we call it 8 Mile. I'm from North Memphis, Watkins and Brown, Garden Street, and nigga, this my brick house.
Brics, all white bricks, all white bricks, white 10 bricks. Just hit a lick for 50 more bricks. Ballin' like a bitch with all
them bricks. With all them bricks.
All these bricks. 36 zips, that's a whole chick. Want a bad bitch, gotta have bricks. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I make hits, but I still take bricks.
Dude. Okay. Okay. Hold on, let me check my audio real quick. Okay. All right, we sounded good. We feeling good. We sounded good. Couldn't have thought of a better song to lead us in with. Ladies and gentlemen, Brics. Brics. We got very interesting live today. So, I've been out the game. I know it's been a while. I'm back, at least for tonight. And we're going to discuss Brics. Now, a lot of you wonder, what is Brics? What's Brics? You've heard it before, maybe, in passing. If you're, walking through the city, hear it on the radio, like people listen to that. Maybe you saw it on the internet. You saw it on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, wherever. Brics. What is it? We're going to deep dive into what Brics is real quick. We're going to discuss what's going on with China and Russia and why today was such a pivotal day. Some people say this is the day the dollar died. Now, maybe that's a bit embellished. Perhaps. Maybe it's true. We're going to kind of talk about what exactly all that means, what the possible ramifications are. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me in the chat. Let me know. We'll see what's going on with Brics. The question is, what is going to happen? Is the recent deal that China and Russia struck, is it going to cause war? Is global hegemonic power going to be shifted? Is it a new world order? Who knows? But there's something going on. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Got a few articles here. As you know, we always study and show thyself approved. So in the description, you'll have a link to the sources to this particular live, so you may read it for yourself and come up to your own opinion. I'm just here to disseminate information and, whatever else I decide. Let's see here. Everything else seems pretty good. Man, there's always something going on. Russia, North Korea. All right. So let's take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and let's go over what Brics is. Then we're going to talk about these Russia-China talks that have been happening, and then what was inked, what it kind of sort of transpired from here. All right, so Brics, let's go to good old Wikipedia. But it says here, Brics is an acronym for the 5 leading emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The first 4 were grouped as BRIC, but you got to have Brics or the Brics. In 2001 by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill, who coined the term, described fast-growing economies that will collectively dominate the global economy by 2050. That's not too long from now. In 2010, South Africa was added. So it's a little bit about the BRICS countries or nations. They have a combined area of 39,746,220 kilometers squared. Estimated total population of 3.21 billion, or 26.7% of the world's land surface, and 41.5% of the global population. Wow, just those countries alone, just those 5 countries alone, you have that, almost half the world's population. And the Russia, Brazil, India, China, among the world's 10 largest countries by population area and GDP. All 5 states are members of the G20, combined nominal GDP of 26.6 trillion, about 26.2% of the gross world product. So they're not small. Currently, the BRICS member leaders in Brazil, Lula da Silva, Russia, Vlad Putin, India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, China, Xi Jinping, and South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, this was formed 16 years ago, and oh, that's cool. Shows a picture. So these were the 61st, the 61st session founders. Okay. So let's see here. The term BRICS was originally developed in context of foreign investment strategy. It was introduced in the Building Better Global Economic BRICS by Chairman Goldman Sachs Asset Manager Jim O'Neill. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of redundant. It's basically all these countries deciding to get together, work together, creating their own economic power club. Not unlike the United States with Europe and a few other countries, some Canada, Mexico, things of that nature. Now, that's what the BRICS is. Now, what's the big deal with BRICS? Well, BRICS has been expanding in 2023. There's 11 additional countries that are interested in joining the BRICS nations. Let's go ahead and take a look at what these countries are. Let's see here. Excuse me. So China's been in the chairship of the BRICS last year, and I believe they just gave up that chairship to South Africa. But prior to that, hey, look at that. Appreciate you. You're going to learn something today. You're going to learn. All right. And then what you have here is China's chairship. One of the highlights of the BRICS meetings was a global development initiative. This initiative for development proposed by President Xi Jinping of China in September 2021 during the general debate of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly was brought up at BRICS-related meetings, setting to the world a strong message of putting development front and center on the international agenda. As pointed out by President Xi, the goal is that no country or individual should be left behind in pursuing development. In 2022, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, BRICS countries came together to promote a joint development through, for instance, BRICS initiatives on trade and investment of sustainable development and digital economy partnerships framework, space cooperation mechanism. So yeah, I mean, they are positioning themselves to be the global economic superpowers. They're getting, trying to take over from America in that regard, being the global superpower. And they got darn near half the population of the planet with them. So they've created their own coalition. The theme of South Africa's 2023 BRICS chairship is BRICS in Africa. BRICS Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth. So BRICS has a very concerted effort in, well, it depends on how you look at it, developing, I'm air quoting, developing Africa, or some will look at it as resource management in Africa, which it makes all these countries a lot richer because Africa is a resource-rich continent. And for one reason or another, the United States has never been able to adequately make relations with Africa. I wonder why. It's interesting. On the financial track, BRICS has established a new development bank and contingent reserve arrangement, which provides funding for important infrastructure and sustainable development projects and safety net for BRICS countries in times of difficulty. New Development Bank also welcomes new members from across the world, such as the UAE. That's one of those members looking to add it. Uruguay, Bangladesh, Egypt. There have been talks about Saudi Arabia and even Mexico. Mexico, guys. They want to get off the dollar. They want to get off the petrodollar. They want to get off the dollar, and they want to be part of BRICS. They're thinking about it. They're like, you know what? We've been rocking with this dollar. We've been rocking with America, and maybe those relationships have gotten strained. Maybe it's not just the best deal for everybody involved anymore. So they're looking at other options. So far, over 11 countries have expressed desire to join BRICS, including Iran, wow, UAE, as we saw, Bahrain in Asia, Egypt, as we said earlier, Algeria in Africa, Argentina in Latin America. And again, like I said, it's not there, but also Mexico's looking at it. So think about what a powerhouse the BRICS nations are going to be. It's going to be way more powerful than the EU was or is. It's just wild. A new world order. We'll look at this one. DW, a new world order. BRICS nations offer alternative to the West. Predictions about the BRICS countries as the fastest growing economies haven't quite panned out. Instead, an alliance is now offering a diplomatic forum and development financing outside of Western mainstream. The acronym began somewhat optimistic term to describe what the world's fastest growing economies at the time. But now BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are setting themselves up as an alternative to an existing international financial and political forum. So BRICS is evolving. The founding myth of emerging economies is faded, confirmed Gunther Mahold, Deputy Director of the German Institute of International Security Affairs, or SWP. I was going to say so. The BRICS countries are experiencing their geopolitical moment. Brazil, Russia, and India, China, and South Africa are trying to position themselves as representatives of the global South, providing an alternative model to the G7. Wow. And for all those that don't know who the G7 is, you have the world's most advanced economies. Founded in 1975, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Japan, Canada, and the U.S., as in the EU. Okay. Let's see here. Challenging the World Bank model. Now, see, whenever we get to talking about the IMF, it's going to get real sticky. This is the world power control. Money and power are the two things that work and coincide when we're talking about global power dynamics and global leadership. In 2014, with $50 billion or 46 billion euro in seed money, the BRICS nation launched the new development bank as an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF fund. Wow. In addition, they created a liquidity mechanism called contingent reserve arrangement to support members struggling with payments. Now, remember, IMF and the World Bank were literally loaning these countries money at exorbitant rates or terms, and they were having trouble paying it back. It was almost like a debt system, essentially. These offers were not only attractive to the BRICS nations themselves, but also to many other developing and emerging economies that had a painful experience with the IMF structural adjustment programs and austerity measures. What did I just say? This is why many countries said they might be interested in joining BRICS. BRICS Bank is open to new members in 2021. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Uruguay, Bangladesh took up shares. However, they're much lower than respective 10 billion investments made by the bank's founding members. Set to expand. South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor has said worldwide interest in the BRICS group is huge. In early March, she told television interviewers she had 12 letters from interested countries on her desk, as well as Mexico. What I tell you, Mexico and Nigeria. So that was one I didn't mention. Mexico and Nigeria want some of this. Amazing. This is the projected economic growth of these countries, the BRICS nations. No sanctions against Russia. Interesting. Since the start of the Russian war in Ukraine, the BRICS countries have only distanced themselves further from the so-called West. Neither India, Brazil, South Africa, or China are taking part in sanctions against Russia. This has become increasingly clear with non-historic levels of trade between India and Russia, or Brazil's dependence on Russian fertilizer. Diplomatically, the war in Ukraine appears to have drawn a stark dividing line between the eastern-backed Russia and the West. Political scientist Matthew Bishop from the University of Sheffield wrote for the Economics Observatory late last year. Consequently, some European and U.S. policy lawmakers worry that the BRICS may become less of an economic club of rising power seeking to influence global growth and development, and more of a political one defined by their authoritarian nationalism. Mahold of German Institute of International Security Affairs, he said the BRICS alliance is not so much a counter to the West, more of a form for increased sovereign and autonomous thought. In a bipolar world, he believes South Africa, India, and Brazil are simply vying for better terms. They want a better deal. China, on the other hand, is using a platform for its global political ambitions. Mahold added, pointing out to Beijing's offer to mediate the war in Ukraine and joint military exercises held with Russia and South Africa. Mahold believes the West has noticed this change in tact and is trying to counteract it. They're looking very closely, he said, points of inviting South Africa and India in order to prevent optics of G7 withstanding against BRICS. So this was originally translated from German. But yeah, you can see there's already a dividing line. World superpowers are joining together, and it's even becoming so attractive that nations that work with and side with and accept the US dollar are like, man, what's good with these BRICS? Gotta have BRICS. Now, I believe Kamala Harris was sent to Africa. Let me see here. Kamala Harris, Africa trip. And it was very, she was called out. She was called out. Was it Tanzania? I think it was Tanzania. Was it Tanzania? Yeah, I think Tanzania was like, man. Or was it Ghana? It might have been Ghana. Ghana was like, man, y'all have such a vested interest. Oh, it might have been Ghana. Was it Ghana? Okay, but basically Kamala Harris is doing a week-long trip in Africa to kind of shore up potential support and relationships. So they're gonna send her, and yeah, it's Ghana. First trip to Africa while in office. Amazing. First U.S. black woman. Zambia and Tanzania. Yeah. So it might have been Tanzania was like, you have such an interest in us, but we know you really, we know you're like have more of an interest in China or keeping China away from us, but we're going to have a relationship with China. So very interesting. Very, very interesting how that's going to all pan out. So that's what the BRICS nations are now, and the United States is trying to do damage control. But I wanted to go ahead and highlight this. Why is all this such a big deal? What is the big issue? Let's take a look at this CNN article. I know, trust me. Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russia President Vladimir Putin have been sweeping affirmation of alignment across a host of issues and shared mistrust of the United States. In a lengthy statement following talks between the two leaders, Their meeting took place under the shadow of Russia's onslaught in Ukraine. Dang, CNN. No question about Beijing's commitment to developing its rapport with Moscow despite Putin's growing isolation on the global stage. Well, as you can see, they're not sanctioning Russia and not upholding the sanctions that were imposed on Russia by the United States. Instead, Xi's 3-day visit to the Russian capital, which concluded Wednesday, was an opportunity for two self-described friends to showcase their close personal rapport. Meeting culminated in more than a dozen agreements bolstering cooperation in areas of trade and technology to state propaganda, according to the Kremlin list. Excuse me. The leader's central statement focused on how the two countries would deepen their relationship. Japan Prime Minister and U.S. ally Fumio Kishida landed in Ukraine to sit down with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Tuesday, further underlining how the conflict in Europe has deepened divisions in Asia. And it's interesting. After that, Zelensky was, I believe reports say that Zelensky's offered Xi Jinping a meeting to sit down with him. No meaningful path forward on Ukraine. Both leaders called for a cessation of action that increases tension and prolongs the war in Ukraine, according to the joint statement released by China's foreign ministry. The statement did not acknowledge that Russia's invasion and military assault were the cause of ongoing violence and humanitarian crisis. Leaders also urged NATO to respect the sovereignty and security interests of other countries, a reference that appeared to echo long-standing rhetoric from both countries falsely blaming the Western Security Alliance for provoking Russia to invade. In recent weeks, China has appeared to position itself as a peace broker, releasing its position on a political solution to help conflict, calling for a ceasefire and peace talks. Putin said that many of the provisions could be taken as the basis for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine when the West and Kiev are ready for it. So, sounds like China is working with Russia on a peace proposal, and they sat down and said, okay, we're willing to do something about it. If we have a basis for this, we can do it. But the proposal has been viewed as a non-starter in the West and Ukraine, as it includes no provision that Moscow withdraw its troops from the Ukrainian land. On Tuesday, Zelensky said a ceasefire would simply freeze the conflict, giving Russia time to prepare and come back in with their single wish, a wish of their leader that is occupying our country. So, not much has kind of popped off from that. New World Order and alignment against the U.S. Experts say that China and Russia's inclination to build their alignment against the U.S. and a world order more suited to their own autocratic agendas was driving the meeting and not interested in resolving the conflict in Ukraine. Xi left the Kremlin following a state dinner on Tuesday evening with Putin. His prior message reiterated his view of global power dynamics are shifting. Together, we should push forward with these changes to have not happened for 100 years. Take care. He said during a goodbye handshake with Putin, alluding to Xi sees an era where the West is fading and China is ascending. In their joint statement, two authoritarian leaders called for promoting a multipolar world. So, yeah, no longer bipolar. They said multipolar. A buzzword for system not led by so-called Western values and rules, and pledged to work together to safeguard the international system and the United Nations, where the two have a track record of blocking motions, including against actors like North Korea. This also hit Washington at multiple points, including saying to urge the United States to stop undermining international regional security and global strategic stability in order to maintain its own unilateral military superiority. So, yeah, a lot of tough words. And it's very explicit and clear in terms of identifying the United States as a major security threat. Military mutual trust and defense ties. So, yeah, they did a lot of joint exercises, military joint exercises. They did a lot of those in South Africa as well. So, pretty much they're forming their own alliance. And it's big. It's really big. Because they're going to, the word on the street is that they're going to as BRIC nations, I mean, they've already got their monetary system ready to go. They're going to start deciding to work with the yuan. They're going to decide to, I believe they're going to decide to use the yuan as the medium of exchange throughout all of the countries, the BRICS nations. And if that's the case, the dollar's going bye-bye. And if the dollar goes bye-bye, it could spell economic collapse for all the countries that use the dollar, including the United States. That might also incite a war. Or there's a lot at stake here. But that's pretty much what BRICS is. That is what's going on with Russia and China, and what the big deal is with the potential of war, economic downturn, and just overall political theater. Now, I wanted to highlight something. Because Russia, China, the BRICS nations are very big, they're able to protect themselves. But this getting off the dollar has been a desire for a long time. Now, let's take a look at this guy. You guys may not remember who he is. His name's Muammar Gaddafi. Now, he was you can call it dictator of Libya. He was the leader of Libya before the Obama administration had, in the Hillary Clinton State Department, pretty much put a hit out on him and killed him. So it says African gold, oil, and the challenge to monetary imperialism. Let's read this because this is interesting. What was NATO's violent intervention in Libya really about? We know, writes Ellen Brown, thanks to Hillary Clinton's recently published emails, it was to prevent the creation of an independent hard currency in Africa that would free the continent from economic bondage under the dollar, the IMF, remember we read that earlier, and the French African franc, shaking off the last heavy chains of colonial exploitation. Interesting. The brief visit of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to Libya in October 2011 was referred to the media as a victory lap. We came, we saw, he died. She crowed in the CBS video interview, hearing the capture and brutal murder of Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi. But the victory lap, writes Scott Chan and Joe Becker in the New York Times, was premature. Libya was relegated to the back burner by the State Department. The country dissolved into chaos, leading into a civil war that would destabilize the region, fueling refugee crisis in Europe, allowing the Islamic State to establish a Libyan haven that the United States is now desperately trying to contain. U.S. NATO intervention was allegedly undertaken on humanitarian grounds after reports of mass atrocities, but human rights organizations questioned the claim after finding a lack of evidence. Today, however, verifiable atrocities are occurring. As you guys may or may not know, it devolved so bad, there's actual slavery in Libya going on. Actual slavery. It's crazy. The human rights situation in Libya is a disaster. Thousands of detainees, including children, languish in prisons without proper judicial review. Kidnapping, targeted killings are rampant. And against slavery. Education before Libya, 2011, Libya had achieved economic independence with its own water, its own food, its own oil, its own money, and its own state-owned bank. It had arisen under Gaddafi from one of the poorest countries to one of the richest in Africa. Education and medical treatment were free. Having own was considered a human right, and Libyans participated in the original system of local democracy. The country boasted the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River Project, which brought water from the desert to the cities and coastal areas. And Gaddafi was embarking on a program to spread the model throughout Africa. But that was before U.S. NATO forces bombed the irrigation system, wreaked havoc on the country. Today, the situation is so dire that President Obama has asked his advisors to drop options, including a new military front in Libya. and Defense Department reportedly standing ready with the full spectrum of military operations required. Here's the big thing. Gaddafi's government holds 143 tons of gold and a similar amount of silver. The goal was intended to establish a pan-African currency based on Libyan golden dinar. This plan was designed to provide Francophone Africa with an alternative to the CFA. All right. I'm going to read that again. That's so important. Gaddafi's government held 143 tons of gold and a similar amount in silver. The goal was intended to establish a pan-African currency based on the Libyan golden dinar. This plan was designed to provide Francophone Africa with an alternative to the CFA. So what does that mean? The United States dollar used to, prior to the 1970s Bretton Woods conference, was tied to gold. After the Bretton Woods conference, it became what it is, fiat currency, backed by America's military might, some would say, or oil, the petrodollar. That's what it was, oil-based, not gold-based. So they stopped tying their money to gold. Now, Africa, as we all know, is a continent-rich country. Well, not a resource-rich continent with tons of countries within that continent. That's what it is. So what Gaddafi, as I just read, what he was trying to do was gain African independence, Pan-African independence, meaning the continent of Africa could have been self-sustaining and actually monetize their own resources and became a producer throughout the world instead of a poor consumer that is pretty much under the whim and desperation of International Monetary Fund like the IMF and other countries and other foreign powers. And they killed them, right? So they orchestrated the death of Gaddafi. And that Pan-African dinar and all of that gold was never realized. So it makes you really want to ask, when you look back in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, what happened here? And was this the United States meddling in African countries once again? Maybe this is why the United States has never been able to have a really, really good relationship and a footprint in Africa, in these African countries, in the African continent, with the exception of a few bases. But that's, necessarily done out of desperation for these countries. So I want to make it clear that this wasn't the first time that countries, continents, groups of countries have tried to get out from under the IMF and the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. They've tried. And a lot of these countries, there are very few countries left on the planet that don't actually have a World Bank branch in their country. Let that sink in. And usually the holdouts, you'll find they're in some sort of economic or there's some turmoil going on in that country. But China, these Brics nations, this yuan, this Chinese yuan, the agreed upon currency for the Brics nations, China, Russia, and the rest of the countries are backing their gold reserves to back this. So this digital yuan or regular yuan or this Brics nations yuan or this Brics nations currency, whatever they decide to call it, is actually going to be backed by gold, which is going to make it a rival, if not more valuable than the dollar. It's the same thing that Gaddafi was going to do and bring throughout the entire African continent so they could get their economic freedom. The BRICS nations are doing it. So you got to ask yourself, at that time, Hillary Clinton and the State Department and the Obama administration made sure that didn't happen. But are they going to be able to intercede and use NATO forces to start a war and keep Russia, China, India, Brazil, North Korea, whoever? I don't think North Korea is part of BRICS, but all these other countries, are they going to be able to keep them from doing this? Is war the answer? Are we seeing a war based on money and power about to happen? Not necessarily human rights issues. Not necessarily, are we seeing political theater? Is this all a plan? Is this, there's so many questions that come from this. But when you know history like this, it all starts to make sense. So just wanted to bring that to you. Again, all the links are in the description, and that's what we have. I hope that made sense. I hope that I don't know what's going to happen, but at least now you know what the BRICS are, and you got to have BRICS. So again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you found this information to be very helpful, please do so. Please share it, and be doing more of this when I get time. And I hope you're all well. God bless you all. And as always, keep it real. BRICS.